I have to talk really loud.
Okay, so this is your microphone. So it's not, you don't have to like shout into it.
Okay. No. Should we keep the door open for a few minutes?
Oh, it's cracked, yeah, people can come in.
Hello.
Okay, guys, so we're at 11:30 and we've got a good amount to cover to give you guys a bunch of information here. So we're gonna get things rolling. So just as an introduction, Nina Deno here is my wife, as some of you might know. And tell us, if you can, just tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your background, please.
Okay, I'm Nina. Nathan. So I have a background in different areas of science, natural science. So I did my bachelor degree in chemistry, specifically organic chemistry. So really just the production of different drugs initially. And then I also have a Bachelor of Arts degree in dance too. So I have a lot of fitness focus, like kinesiology, anatomy. And then I took a hiatus dance for Disney World for a year and then decided to pursue my PhD. So I was really interested in metabolism, really interested in health. And so I came to Purdue, so I met Nathan, to get my PhD in biochemistry. And during that time while I was at Purdue, I was also teaching in the medical school, and so I was working with medical students on medical biochemistry and metabolism. My PhD is actually in epigenetics, so I do a lot about how things change, how your genes are turned on and off, in the context of drug resistance as well as hypoxia, so if you have low oxygen, but it all relates still back to general metabolism. So I graduated in December, actually technically August, I descended last year, and now I work for Cook on the west side, and I'm a clinical scientist there, so I'm working on clinical studies, pretty much focused on like cardiac devices, heart health. So yeah, so impressive knowledge.
Me, I have a bachelor's of science in business administration. Yeah, that's all. Yeah.
You married up.
Yeah, I married up. But just
I don't know if I finished my PhD when I married you, so.
A little bit of additional background. We've been doing keto for
I really got into it 3 years ago.
3 years,
in the
yeah.
fall. So Alberta Health is working with IU using the Keto Diet to treat obesity. I met with Sarah Hallberg, who started that. She came to the medical school when I was teaching there, and that's when I was first interested in keto. We started probably 3 years ago.
Yeah. I've been in for, well, we've both been in basically 100 and some odd days straight right now.
Yeah, we go in and out.
So, but yeah, but anyway, so that's a little bit of background about us. So one thing we do want to make is a disclaimer here. We are not medical doctors. So anyone who's planning on making a dramatic change to their diet should consult their physician, and make sure to do your own research as well. We're going to provide you with some resources later on in the presentation for you to do that research. But you know, if you have any medical conditions or anything like that, make sure to talk to your physician before you do anything, okay? All right, so what are we going to talk about today? So first of all, we're going to start off with kind of just a basic understanding of what macronutrients are and how your body interacts with them. On top of that, then we're going to really just get into the heart of it, of what is the keto diet, what is ketosis, why should I even think about the keto diet, and if you know, from there, how do you get into ketosis, or how do you start the keto diet? Also, we're going to have some samples of kind of what an average day's meal will look like, so you'll have a sense of, you know, okay, this is what I would be kind of eating on the diet. I also have thrown in some of my own examples in there from my logging, so you can look at that. We've also got a bunch of FAQs, which are really common questions around keto, and then we've provided you with some really awesome keto resources. So we've got a lot to cover, and so, but feel free to jump in and ask questions if you have any, and if that question's addressed later on in the presentation, we'll just tell you that and say, just hold your horses and we'll get to it. Okay, so Nina's going to kick us off with understanding macronutrients.
Okay, so we're going on a basic level here. So we all hear the word macros, which stands for macronutrient. So it's a pretty little cartoon on the left has your 3 basic main macronutrients. So most, all in all, they are just chemicals that we use to produce energy in our body, and they're broken down into protein, fats, and carbohydrates. And so I forgot to do this, bring all the little things there.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, so if you had to guess which one of these you can live without, which one would you guess?
Carbs.
Yeah, I would be on the keto diet. So yes, carbohydrates are not used to build any essential components of our body to live. So you can take them out and you'll be fine. And that's because what carbohydrates do for you, you can also do with proteins and fats. So there are the three major macronutrients, but alcohol recently has been categorized in its own macronutrient. So one thing I like to talk about people when they're talking about is what I eat. If you take in 1 gram of carbohydrate or 1 gram of protein, it's going to take 3 calories of energy to burn that gram. However, with fat, it takes 9 calories to burn 1 gram of fat. So if you think about it, it takes 3 times as much energy to burn 1 gram of fat, which is why when you eat a high-fat meal, you're full for way longer. And so people for, the FDA and the media in the last 30 years have been saying, fat is fat. That is not true. Carbohydrates are broken down into sugar that can be stored as fat. Fat does not do that. But what is nice to know is that if you eat diet in high fat, you're going to be satiated for a long period of time. So you're not going to feel hungry as fast. Where alcohol is 7 calories per gram, and that can be broken down mostly into just ethanol, and that's different than the other 3 components. So simplicity, your macronutrients, we eat them, they go through our systems, our gastrointestinal tract, and what happens is that there are these chemicals or workhorses known as enzymes that break down all of that food into these small components. And those small components that we think of as carbs, fat, and protein end up being made into energy sources. They're all generated into our big component of energy known as ATP. So we'll get back into that later, but ultimately you're breaking this down as you digest them. So if you have questions about bigger words, just let me know. But mostly you take in your food, they break down into all these smaller chemicals, and then they get converted. And so we think of bread as carbohydrates. That's true. They also come in forms of pasta, rice, fruit, and other sources. Meat, you think about as proteins, also in the form of eggs and several other things. Margarine, butters, oils are going to be your fats. What happens is you digest them and you break them into these smaller components, your glucose, your amino acids, and your fatty acids. So when you take glucose, you go through glycogenesis, and that ends up breaking down the glucose into ATP, and that's energy for all of our cells. So we're just one big mass of cells, and everything is made of cells, and ultimately ATP is driving those cells. Amino acids, that's your proteins. Protein synthesis, you go through, make ATP with that, and you also build more protein so you can make more cells so we can live. Fatty acids are broken down into multiple different things, including phospholipids, which are the core of your cell. So your cell is made up of ultimately structural components, and those are coming from fatty acids. And they also make ATP. So you need all these. Now, for the sake of argument, if you think of a cell, over 90% of that cell is made up of fatty acids and your protein. So why on the food pyramid do we say we need to eat a majority of carbohydrates if ultimately we are built of proteins and fats? It doesn't make any sense. So we ultimately are going to get into this sugar question. And so if you take anything home from today, even if you don't want to do the keto diet, think about sugar. So glucose is what we call sugar mostly in the metabolic world. But also the same as sugar and carbohydrates. So these are all your forms of sugar. So anybody have any idea what happens when you eat too much sugar?
You get hyper and you get fat.
You get hyper, you get fat, you also get really tired, and you become dependent on sugar.
And get diabetes.
And you get diabetes.
And sugar is not just candy. It's also carbohydrates. It's rice, it's bread, it's
It comes
pasta.
in forms you don't even think about. It comes in beans, it comes in sweet potatoes, it comes in places you won't even think you're going to get them from. And so it's really good to start looking at food labels to look at carbohydrates. And food labels, just the word carbohydrate doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. You need to look at the sugar. So we're going to get into a few more things here. So if you had to guess, and I meant to bring how much this looks like, but if you had to guess how much sugar is in your blood at one time, what would you guess from A to Z? 5 grams, double that 10 grams, even more than that 25, or 50 milligrams, which is much smaller than the grams.
25 grams.
How much?
25 grams.
25 C?
I'd say probably A. I don't think it necessarily has to be a lot of sugar in your food.
Anyone else?
Well, fasting will be 5 grams maybe, but after a big fat meal.
All right, anyone else have a guess?
I don't want to take a stab at it. It depends on what they eat.
50 milligrams, either it's 25 or 50.
All right, so it's actually 5 grams. So 5 is, it's anywhere between 4 and 6, depending on how big of a person you are. But even if you eat a high carbohydrate meal, it's still not going to go much above 5 grams. So you're talking about when you take your blood glucose level, you're looking at milligrams per deciliter, and that converts, after having X number of deciliters of blood in your body, it converts to around 5.
5 grams, like 1 spoon, isn't it?
Teaspoon.
1 teaspoon?
About pretty much 1 teaspoon of sugar. Does anybody have any idea how many grams of sugar are in a can of Coke?
Oh, it's like a cup of something, isn't it?
Way more, it's a lot, yeah, 10.
It's 39 grams of sugar are in 1 can of Brian.
What?
39 grams of sugar in
I'm an addict.
that
One
Coke.
can of Coke. So if
More
your
than
blood,
7
if your
times.
whole body only has 5, but there's 39 in a can of Coke, just one, what does your body do with that blood, that sugar? It does several things. So
Probably here.
It decays your organs.
it will take, yes, you'll end up pretty much talking about diabetes. You're developing
Yeah.
later on. We'll actually go back one more. So the bottom question I added in, okay, Shane, you can't answer this one. What's the normal range for blood glucose levels in a healthy adult if you're not diabetic?
100, 120 or something.
150?
140.
A little bit under 150. You want to be around 100, without eating. When you eat, then it'll bounce a little bit, goes up. Preferably you want to be under 140 by that point, but you don't want to be less than 70. So if you're under 70 milligrams per deciliter, you're running into hypoglycemia, and that can cause a whole lot of problems. But in a diabetic, you're going to have a much higher number than that, because you cannot deal with the amount of sugar in your blood.
So by doing keto, can you get under 70?
Oh, yeah.
You can, and you have to be very careful with that because you can go into what we call hypoglycemic coma. So you do not want to go under that. So if you're going to do the keto diet and you're going to be really stringent about it, if you're taking any kind of diabetes medicine, you need to consult your doctor because it's very likely that when you do the keto diet, within a few weeks to a month, you can drop that way too low and you can run the risk of going into a coma.
That's why we had a disclaimer at the beginning.
Yeah.
We're not doctors. Talk to
You
your
wanna
physician,
tell-
especially if you have any, metabolic issue whatsoever.
Yeah, if you're especially on glucophage, which is metformin.
Basically, if we collapse, it's on us. If we lose weight, you guys get the credit.
That's right. That's right.
Even if we lose weight.
If you see me on the floor.
So we do, some people wonder, like, they don't really know that they're going to become really sensitive to the drugs that they're taking if they are diabetics. You really do need to consult with your physician before you decide to go heavy into this. And you may want to consider measuring your blood glucose levels just to make sure you're not running the risk of a hypoglycemic condition.
Got it.
Okay, so what happens when you eat the high carbs? When you eat the high carbs, your blood sugar goes way up. So we have a graph on the right here that shows you what happens to blood sugar and when you eat the 3 different macros. So you get a huge carbohydrate meal, you spike super high. We're talking within like an hour. So you get that like, yeah, I'm full and I have lots of energy. And then about 2 hours in, you're like, I need a nap. It's because you plummet your blood glucose levels at that point because your body's trying to take that glucose out of the blood. With proteins, you have a moderate spike in your blood glucose, and when you eat fat, you virtually have no spike in blood glucose levels, which when that happens, you don't go through the, yay, I have energy, no, I'm really tired, now I need more. So you don't go through that roller coaster of the energy waves. So this is a big take-home message. If you eat too much carbohydrates, your body can only deal with so much to process and excrete, and so what's left over, you go through lipogenesis, which is the process to make adipose tissue or fat. And so ultimately what happens is you eat the carbohydrates, your blood glucose goes up, and a hormone known as insulin is released from your pancreas. And that insulin is this little molecule that finds that glucose and takes it out of the blood and into the cells so that the cells can make the energy, ATP. If you don't have that, your blood glucose goes, okay, I want to be stored. And it gets stored as another sugar component known as glycogen in your liver or your muscles, When you run out of that, you don't need any more of that, like your body says, oh, okay, we have to do something with it, and it makes fat. So that's what happens if you have too much sugar at a time. If you have a low carbohydrate meal, you don't go through that process because your insulin does not need to respond to take any glucose out of your blood.
Which is why it's great for diabetes. Keto's
It's
great for
absolutely
diabetes.
great for diabetes, and that's because diabetes is a metabolic syndrome, and we'll get into
The
that.
point here is that when you take too much carbohydrates, then your body has to decide what to do with it.
And it's going to go through a certain process. So it's going to first say, we need energy. So if you're running, like we talk about marathon runners can have some carbohydrates, it's because they need energy really fast. So you're going to go through glycogenesis, ultimately the glucose metabolism.
How long does that process take?
That is dependent on what your body needs. So if your body is deprived of energy from running or some kind of high energy state, probably within half an hour or so, you'll go through that. Glycogen gets stored. There's only so much storage for that in your muscles and in your liver. So when it maxes that out, then it's not going to go through glycogen storage process anymore. That's when you go through lipogenesis at the end.
Fat.
But the fat, yep, so lipogenesis is building lipids, which are fat. And that's going to get stored in all of those adipose
So
tissues.
this is only for carbohydrate intake, right?
So mostly you will get that with protein as well. So if you eat way too much protein and you're not using that, protein gets converted to glucose through gluconeogenesis, and then that glucose will go back through the same process.
That's not even relevant. What happens with fat? Because you're already having fat.
Yeah, so if you go through fat, you break that down to fatty acids and glycerol. And glycerol is ultimately going to be made into glucose, but you're not going to be able to eat as much of that because it's so high in calories. You're going to eat less of the fat. So in the first slide, we were talking about how it takes 3 calories to burn 1 carb. It takes 9 calories to burn 1 gram of fat. So you're going to essentially, in theory, eat 3 times less fat, and so you're not going to have as much glucose made from that.
In theory.
In theory.
If you don't.
You really can't, I mean, I try it if I
I mean, that's why you can eat like a huge pile of rice,
yep.
and then you could eat like a small portion of bacon.
If you
And like
try-
that bacon is way more satisfying, and it will sit with you longer, and you won't feel like crap compared to the pile of rice, at least in my experience.
And also, you don't get that kind of water absorption with fat like you do with carbohydrates. And so you won't have the bloating effects and other things that come along with that too. But ultimately, if you tried to eat a cup of pasta or a cup of butter, tell me which one's harder to eat. A cup of butter is going to take a lot longer to eat, and it's going to be way more filling. Sounds gross, but it's true. Okay, so diabetes is a metabolic syndrome. So if you've talked to anybody, and I'm talking specifically about type 2 diabetes. Type 1 and type 2 are vastly different. We are talking about type 2 diabetes, diabetes mellitus, and so that is a problem with insulin usage, or what we call insulin sensitivity. And so insulin is a hormone that your pancreas makes, and that is what responds to the blood sugar. And so when you secrete insulin, your cells will take up the glucose, and you'll see a picture later. Insulin, the chemical of insulin is paired with the glucose in your blood, and that helps transport that out of the blood and into the cell. So if you continue to eat carbohydrates and you go up and down, and the blood, every time the blood glucose rises, your insulin has to secrete. If you overwork your pancreas essentially to make that insulin, you're going to become less sensitive to the glucose levels in your blood. And that is what develops into type 2 diabetes. You go through a state of what we call insulin resistance before you become diabetic. So lots of people are pre-type 2 diabetic and don't know it, and lots of people are resistant to their insulin. That doesn't mean you don't make insulin, which is what type 1 diabetes is. It just means you're not able to sense the blood glucose
Regulate
level, and you have high levels of blood glucose in your blood. And so with that, you go through the same cycle.
So almost like the analogy of a drug user who's like an addict, and they use an amount of drugs, and they get a high, and then they need to use more, and they need to use more. The same thing is kind of applying in this scenario where your blood sugar, your insulin keeps spiking, it keeps trying to handle the amount of sugar that you're handling, but it gets weaker and weaker and weaker over time. So that's basically building up to where you have true type 2 diabetes.
And eventually your body, over a long, long period of time, prolonged exposure to carbohydrates will result in your pancreas basically saying, I give up and I don't need to make insulin anymore. And that's when you run into the issue of becoming, you will be diabetic at that point, but you won't be able to reverse it because you cannot get that sensitivity back, and your insulin won't be secreted anymore. So your pancreas basically stops functioning in that regard. So the other thing too is like the worst thing you could do if you're a diabetic is take insulin, because now you're telling your system it doesn't need to make it anymore. And so you lose that sensitivity.
Oh, you're putting insulin in me? I'm good. I don't need to create anymore.
Yeah, my body doesn't need to make it.
Yeah.
And so you're just driving the problem further. So, go ahead.
Yeah, a little stat here on the bottom. 1 in 3 adults already has insulin resistance. So if you look at all of us in the room here, there's more than 9 of us in here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So in theory, 3 of us could have insulin resistance already and not even know it.
Question with that. How much, so there's several people in my family that are diabetics, knock on wood. I so far haven't had any problems with that, but how much of that is genetic related? And obviously you're the person to ask about. How much of that is genetic related? How much of that is lifestyle?
So there is a genetic component. What that is, we don't understand that in research, but ultimately the genes that are in your pancreas that are used to make that insulin, their expression levels may be different just by genetic purposes. However, the diet is going to drive it much more than your genetics ever will. And so the same thing kind of goes for cholesterol levels. Your cholesterol production is 70% due to your genetics, which is opposite of what the insulin production is.
Brian, I give you a different answer. You can't control your gene anyway, so this is the only thing you can control.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
that's a valid point.
Can your pancreas ever get too lazy if you don't have enough sugars? Is that like?
No, actually, and that's
That's a good
because
question.
your fats and your proteins still ultimately make some glucose, so you're still getting that response. It's just much more controlled, because you're not going to get as big of a spike as you would with the other food.
Okay.
So when you eat protein, you're still going to make some glucose because your body still needs that 5 grams of glucose. It just regulates that 5 grams much better than you would if you take in way too much. But you will still be using insulin. Okay, so I like diagrams, I'm a scientist. So we're talking about the blood vessels and having all of this glucose in your blood. And so in a normal blood vessel, you have these blue dots, which are your glucose, and they're flowing through your blood vessels. And when you have that glucose that comes in, your insulin is secreted from your pancreas and crosses into the blood vessel. And what it does is it finds those glucose molecules and then takes it across the vessel, and then from here it's going to go into the cells. And so you can kind of see it looks pretty much like a 1-to-1 ratio here. However, when you get to this insulin resistance, it's trying to pair with your glucose, but it's not able to get it across here as well. The sensitivity to go from the blood vessel into the cell isn't there anymore. And so you have all of this in your blood vessel, and your glucose levels are way too high. Eventually, when you become diabetic, you get less of these yellow molecules coming in, and you can't get the glucose out.
And it's not fun. I've been there.
No, it's really, I don't. If you take any of this home with you, even if you don't want to be keto, just think about how much sugar you eat at a meal, and if you can just lower that so you're like not eating sugar at breakfast, or not eating sugar at dinner, just mitigating that is going to help you prevent the development of insulin resistance. So ultimately, you're preventing ever getting diabetes because it is controllable. Okay, so assuming your pancreas still functions, you can reverse this problem, and the ketogenic diet is one way to do that.
All right, so what is keto? So the keto diet, we just looked at the macros, right? But really what the keto diet is a very, very high fat diet with a moderate amount of protein and a very, very small amount of carbs. And we can see here on a little pie chart, there's got some percentages, might be kind of hard for you guys to see, but the typical ratio is 75% fat, 20% protein, and 5% carbs. Okay, so this really, was originally developed as a treatment for epilepsy in children. And they found that by treating them with this diet, that their epileptic seizures were greatly reduced. But then, as more research found related to metabolic diseases, people found that the keto diet was applicable to, a lot of other types of, metabolic syndromes and things along that line.
People think the keto diet's new. It's not. It's 100 years old at least, if not longer.
Give me 1 second, actually, I got distracted there. Low carb.
So if you put this in gram quantity, you're talking like 20 grams or less carbs in a day.
Yeah. So with that much fat though, that fat and cholesterol are tied together to a certain extent, can that lead to high cholesterol with a high fat diet?
Yeah, this is actually the number one concern right now is the ketogenic diet. So we don't have 20 years of controlled studies on this right now. We're pretty much in that first decade of super controlled experiments. Here's what we're finding. We're finding that your HDL and your LDL both go up at the same time, as well initially as your triglycerides. So in your first 6 months, on average, and this is dependent on age and gender and how much you have cholesterol in your system, you're going to have an increase initially. However, the breakdown of fats that you're using from your fat stores are in the form of the triglycerides. So after that about 6 month period, you start to plummet your triglyceride levels. The initial data of cholesterol becoming your clogged arteries and heart disease is actually very bad data. So it really isn't, there's a correlation between high cholesterol and cardiovascular disease. It's not causative. So there are concerns, but not every calorie of fat looks the same. And so if you eat the right fats that break down into these small fat chains, you're going to be able to use them better and they're not going to clog your arteries. So it just depends on the types of fats. So we'll talk about good fats versus bad fats. But ultimately, your LDL increase does not say anything about your cardiovascular disease, and increase of HDL is the type that takes cholesterol out of your blood and into your cells. And like I said, over 70% of your cholesterol levels are genetic, which you can't control anyway.
Sure. If you're already high cholesterol and it spikes, is that something to be concerned about right off the bat?
Not really at this point. We haven't really seen any initial cardiovascular concerns within those first few months. Cardiovascular disease is built over a really long period of time, so you're not going to get like a jump in that plaque formation in those first few months. That's years and years of development in the arteries.
So, if somebody is already on the edge on cholesterol and whatnot, they probably should think twice before they start, just for the reason that they are. Otherwise,
yeah, no, if you're hypercholesterolemia, which means that you are above like 300 or really high, you want to talk to your physician first. Because if you're already at that state, you may have already plaque formation that you don't know about, so you don't want to just start that. But you do want to tell your physician, I'm high cholesterol, actually. My total cholesterol is just above where you want it to be, but I don't have any concerns with the diet at this point, and there's no real strong evidence saying no to that. But if you know you're hypercholesterolemia or you have a deficiency in APO2 or another genetic factor that plays into cholesterol, talk to your doctor first.
All right, so what is ketosis? So ketosis is basically, as you can see here, a metabolic state characterized by increased level of ketone bodies in the body tissues, typically found in diabetes or maybe the consequence of a diet that's very low in carbohydrates. So ketone bodies are generated by your liver in conditions of starvation or very low carbohydrate diet. So in a sense, ketosis is the keto diet is kind of tricking your body into a starvation state, okay? And when that happens, your body begins to break down fats into these ketones. And these ketones are used for energy instead of like glucose.
One thing people talk a lot about is your red blood cells only use glucose for energy. That is true. They're going to get that from protein and fats as they are broken down. But your brain feeds off of glucose. Your brain also feeds off of beta-hydroxybutyrate, and so you will still have energy for your brain if you're making these ketone bodies.
And actually, there's some studies that are showing that these ketone bodies are much more efficient for your brain to use, hence the cognitive increases while you're in ketosis.
That same chemical also plays a role in your gene expression. So this beta-hydroxybutyrate has been shown to increase the expression of genes that are involved in breaking down fats, as well as genes that are involved in your cholesterol use. So that's pretty early evidence. That's what I was interviewing for Roberta Health, was how this chemical affects the increase in genes that you want in order to promote fat loss.
Okay. Okay, so with all of that being said, why should I even consider doing the keto diet? Well, there's a lot of reasons. You know, the biggest one we just talked about is obviously preventing insulin resistance, so you don't become insulin resistant and thusly become diabetic. That's a huge one. Another big one that people see is loss of body fat. Okay, that's why it's kind of the new fad diet in a lot of ways. People do lose a lot of weight in this diet. Also, that regulation of energy is very important. Like we talked about that big spike when you eat sugar of energy, but then you crash. With the ketogenic diet, your energy is much more level. Okay, so you don't have that after lunch crash and all of that. The cognitive functions, like I just mentioned, ketones are a much more efficient way for your brain to use energy, and thus you won't be as foggy, you'll be much more clear-headed, a lot snappier, at least in my experience. There's more and more research that's showing that it can prevent and help fight cancer. So, for example, if a person's being treated for cancer, their doctors are oftentimes asking them to go on a ketogenic diet. And the reason for, we can get into that later, but it's looking more and more research that it's a great cancer fighter.
If you have questions about that, just email me. I can give you a scientific reason for that.
Yep. Control your appetite. No more getting hangry. Okay, so when you're hungry, you realize it, but you're not as like, oh my God, I need to eat or I'm going to murder someone. Sleep quality has been shown to improve. Reduce inflammation. So if you have arthritis or any type of inflammation, it's oftentimes tied to glucose and carbohydrates, and that can be reduced significantly with the keto diet. Overall mood improvements, that probably correlates more towards the use of ketones in your brain. Plus there's obviously, if you're going to be losing a lot of weight and if your energy's more level, your mood will also improve. And then there's just more and more research being done, and there's a ton of other benefits that are being shown as well for treatments of specific diseases and all kinds of things.
Yeah, there's a great hormonal benefit to it too, because your fats are essentially what are used to make testosterone, progesterone, and estrogen. So you regulate your levels of your different hormones better when you're not going through these spikes. Also, there have been recent evidence, even myself have seen, I have better skin, like there's just more, I have less problems with breakouts and stuff like that, because I think it's mostly, well, there's lots of reasons for that, but ultimately that if you have issues with if you have issues with gluten, this is another way to help with that.
Hey, Nathan, this is Cameron. I'm dialed in. I was going to say one thing that I saw in my first 2 weeks on keto, I did have a spike in my blood pressure. My blood pressure went up, but since then, it's actually been the best it's ever been, like even since I was 18 and super healthy and working out all the time. So I noticed a huge increase in my blood pressure going down and being at a normal level.
That's a super great point, Cameron. So hypertension is pretty much gone when you're on the ketogenic diet, and that's because you end up using up all of your glycogen. So we're talking about how you take sugar and it makes it into this glycogen molecule that's in your liver and your muscles. Glycogen is in solution, or it's in your body when it's coupled to like 20 different water molecules. When you get rid of that, all of that water is excreted. So if you've been through the ketogenic diet, you all of a sudden realize like 7 days in, you're peeing all the time. It's because you're getting rid of all of that extra water and you're decreasing the tension in your system. And then, so you're right, the blood pressure does tend to go down because you don't have that retention.
So on that note, Shane, would you mind sharing a little bit about your experience and benefits, how long you've been doing keto now?
I started January 15th, and I've lost 45 pounds as of this morning since then.
Yeah!
Almost 45 pounds in 3 months, 4 months?
Yeah, I was also a type 2 diabetic. I guess I still am technically considered that, but in September of last year, my triglycerides were at 288, and March, so a month and a half of doing the keto diet, I was at 151, which normal range for triglycerides are 0 to 150. And my A1C, I think, was at 6.8. And I think normal range is, I can't remember what the beginning is, but it's like,
Anywhere from like, I think it's like 4, I'll have to look at that.
but in March it was 4.8. So I was in normal range in a month and a half.
They might know what A1C is.
No.
So it's a marker in your red blood cells. Your red blood cells survive for about 120 days. And so A1C goes up if you have high blood glucose levels, but it stays in your blood for months at a time. And so it's a really great marker to see what your blood glucose looks like over months, as opposed to what it looks like over those few hours. And so that's what they use to look at prolonged blood glucose.
My daily blood sugar was measuring around 200, even with meds. And now I'm always below 100. I'm at 80, I'm at 90.
That's awesome.
Can one completely snap out of type 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you guys are curious, you can email me. I can send you also the Verta Health's first publication. They're working on their second one with what's going on in town. And if you are interested and you know you're diabetic, I would start looking into maybe getting treated by Verta. So I can point you to a couple doctors that are there too, but they're actually doing the blood tests for ketone levels, and I'm going through how do you do that medically, so.
All right, so we talked a lot about the benefits of keto. So how do I get into ketosis? So there's a couple different ways to do it. There's the gradual way, and then there's the quick and hardcore way. So there's the rip off the Band-Aid quickly option, or there's the slow draw of the Band-Aid. So just to make it known, it's not a very pleasant experience necessarily to go into ketosis, because your body's been using glucose for your entire life. It's not gonna really probably like switching over very easily. So, and we're gonna talk a little bit about the keto flu, and the keto flu is a kind of a known thing. But option number one is to do a fast. So this would be a water fast mostly. You would be able to have some trace amounts of coconut oil, but for 72 hours, you would consume water, maybe with a little lemon juice in it, or lime juice, and salt.
Definitely want salt.
And you want salt in there because you're going to be, that flushing, that peeing, all that is going to take all of your electrolytes out. But basically for 3 days, you don't eat. You can drink black coffee and tea.
Would you take a multivitamin or anything like that with that?
That's a good question. There's conflicting evidence with that right now. I would say if you are very much dependent or in need of, if you don't absorb vitamin D very well or other fat-soluble vitamins, then I would still take it because your MCT oil, I would take it with the MCT oil.
And MCT oil is just refined coconut oil. You can find it on Amazon. If you want to just use coconut oil, you can totally do that too. But like when I've done it, I put it in my coffee, and then throughout the day, I'll put it in my tea. So I'll create some black tea or some coffee and just put it in that. But basically, during that time, you're going to want to sleep as much as you can. So it's a good idea to start it like on a Thursday and then take it into the weekend. So that way you're sleeping a ton on Saturday and Sunday. And then try to get some activity, some light, really light activity. Don't go to the gym and work out hard because you will crash. Trust me, I've done it. I worked in the yard when I was fasting one time, and I was just like, I crawled my way into the house, not literally, but it wiped me out big time. So take it easy when you're doing that. Walking is a really good activity to do.
And that's walking within like the first 24 hours. You want to kind of sleep on the tail end, but when you're first going to that deprivation of glucose and using up your glycogen, which takes about 48 hours, you're going to want to be walking. And that just helps to make the process happen faster.
So the other option is just transitioning to that high-fat, low-carb, super low carbohydrate diet, and that is an easier way on your body, to do it, but it will kind of draw out the process of that transition. Your body, doesn't immediately go into starvation mode like it does with fasting. So, we've got some options here. You can super increase your fat intake, really, really lower your carbohydrates. Start eating a lot of green vegetables or other vegetables. Salads are great to help that transition. And that'll take about a week, as we noted here, depending on your body. The more often that you do this transition, which you don't want to do it down all the time, because that's not good for your health either. But the more often that you're in, or the longer you're in ketosis, the easier it becomes to get back into it.
So this cholesterol question is balancing in and out is what's going to be bad are like, ooh, keto. And then they get to the point where they're going through the flu and they're like, I give up.
I don't know if it was just me or what, but I didn't really experience the keto flu at all.
So I also women have a harder time than men.
I drank a lot of water and I used a lot of light salt during, I still do.
Did you go through the fast phase, or did you?
No, I did the gradual.
I did the gradual. Like, I prefer the gradual just because I stuck it at being hungry and I can't do that. I don't like to fast as much. But you're right about the salt probably helps out a lot because when I first did this, I didn't realize how much cramping came or GI distress comes without having those balanced electrolytes. And so, yes, you need to drink bone broth when you are going through it, or you put salt in your water if you're doing the fasting.
Yeah, either way, you need to.
Just water, basically, all you're having is water.
No,
With salt in it.
like the light salt, like
And then, yeah, and with a little bit of coconut oil or
That's
MCT
a trigger
oil.
for me, so we have lots of
So
pickles at home.
coffee has to be with coconut oil?
It's recommended because what that does is it gets trace fats into your system for your body to begin to transition over with.
Yeah, it's telling your body, oh, okay, you're giving me something, I'm gonna use the fat.
Right.
So it starts
So
to
your
tell your
liver-
body to digest the fat. And then it helps convert from digesting those fats that you're.
So even tea with oil?
Mhm.
Tea with oil. Yep, MCT oil.
And it's not wonderful, trust me, but it's something, and you're like, oh, it's calories, so I'm okay with it. Whatever.
So with the fasting part, if I were to do this, I'd prefer the Band-Aid method. But, so with the fasting part, how much salt per day would you say?
5,000 milligrams.
5,000 milligrams.
Yeah.
if you use light salt, it contains potassium and sodium.
Actually, we can take a picture of our light salt at home, you're right.
It's a,
Okay, so this is just like iodized, like just,
Well, you can do,
I mean.
like Himalayan salt, for example, is a good option because it has
That's the
other
pretty stuff, the
in it.
pink salt, okay, yeah.
pink salt, yeah.
You do want
And then
potassium, you do want sodium,
Magnesium.
and you want chloride, because your cells go through their different channels of needs of salt, so you don't want just the sodium chloride, you need the potassium in order for all of those functions to work well.
and it's hard to get potassium, but that light salt is like perfect.
And it doesn't taste weird either, like that's nice about the light salt, so, and you were talking about pickle juice, like,
Yeah.
when I'm low in my salt, I drink pickle juice and it tastes delicious.
Yeah. You'll know when your body needs salt, where if you take a pinch of salt and put it directly on your tongue, and you're not like, oh, God, that's gross, but you're like, oh, my God, that tastes amazing, and you want more of it, that's when you can tell that you're deficient.
And eat it to the point until you're like, oh, no, this is just
Yeah.
gross now. Like, your body will tell you you've had too much. But, yeah, it's very much, almost 3 times the amount of salt that's recommended in a day.
You did that over the weekends?
Yep, started it on a Thursday. Thursday night was our last meal. No food on Friday, no food on Saturday.
You're literally
Conveniently,
spending the
it's a
entire week
Thursday.
talking about what your meal's going to be at the end of the week.
Yeah, and Instagram is the worst thing when you're fasting because everybody posts their food and you're like, I just gotta put this away because people are
question.
amazing.
I would suggest like building up things like decluttering your house and things you wouldn't normally do for days like, for weekends like that, so you have things to do instead of thinking about,
Keep
what am I
yourself
gonna eat on
occupied.
Sunday?
Yeah.
Just not yard work.
So what happened, I mean, I think the question is, you start on a Thursday morning and.
No, well, technically you start on a Friday morning because your last meal is Thursday night.
Dinner on Thursday is your last meal.
Thursday night,
So if you start tonight,
So
like a light meal tonight?
you would have a low carbohydrate meal tonight, and then starting tomorrow morning, the only thing you consume for the whole weekend, except for Sunday night, when you break your fast, is just MCT oil.
So commonly on Thursday when we start this, we have steak and we put butter on top of it, like a garlic butter, and then we do like asparagus or something for dinner, covered in butter. And then we go from there into the next day, so.
so you keep doing this? It's not like a one-time?
Fasting is another option that some people do periodically for a variety of other reasons. But the fasting itself is just it's the quick way into ketosis.
And then what happens after that? Monday, you're back to normal diet?
No.
Well, you're back to a
high-fat diet?
Correct.
High fat, no,
Yeah.
yeah, low carb.
Starting on that Sunday when you eat the first meal, you make sure you're eating the low carbohydrate diet.
Once you're in ketosis for a while, fasting becomes a lot easier because that hunger isn't there.
I did the gradual way into it, and I was in ketosis in 4 days. After 4 days, I was in it, but I will say that 3 of those days really, really sucked. I mean, brain fog, low energy. The only thing that actually made me feel better, and Shane mentioned it, was pickle juice. I mean, I went into the kitchen at Walt's Pub, and they got huge jug of pickles, and I just took a cup and dipped it in and drank pickle juice, and that was the only thing that made me like feel better during that. But once you're in it, you do feel way more energy and much better, but the 3 days can be kind of rough.
Yeah, so the keto flu is exactly what Cameron's talking about, and these will be the things that you'll more than likely go through as you transition over, okay? Now, don't make the mistake that I did. When we first started to do this, I kind of half-assed did it, right? I was eating low carb, but I was eating a ton of protein, and I was still having some carbohydrates. And so, honestly, I was in this flux where I was just in the keto flu the whole time, as my body didn't know what the heck it was doing.
Yeah, so
Don't make that mistake. If you're gonna do this, commit to it and go all in, because otherwise you will feel like this for a long time, and it sucks.
the tracking, you really have to commit to the 20% protein.
Yeah.
It's no joke, because if you start to convert into ketogenesis, the moment you have too much protein, it goes, oh, this is easier to make glucose than going through ketogenesis. And so if you're like, I need protein to survive, then you may just want to be in a low carb diet.
And I am a meat eater, but think about it this way, and we'll get into it in a little bit more detail. It's the ratio, right? So if you are a really active person, you're working out a lot, and you have a high caloric need, you're going to be able to eat plenty of protein, but your fat content, of course, is going to be much higher than that protein content.
You can get fattier pieces of meat like chicken thighs.
Yep, we only cook with thighs, you're totally right.
Yeah.
And we cook with all sorts of fat content. Also, on top of that, any meat that we do, even when I'm at work, I cover with a tablespoon or 2 of butter.
Yes.
Just add the butter.
The side effects, do they continue through for a long time, or do
No.
they die out?
So this will, if you're doing it
The weekend
correctly,
you're talking about?
well, yeah, you will go through this if you fast, but it will only be over that weekend.
Instead of for
and
like
then you're
7
good.
to 10 days.
If you do the normal gradual transition, then you're going to feel that for a little bit longer. And it varies person to person. Like Shane said, he didn't even really notice it. Cameron, on the other hand, had a more intense experience with it.
I go through a super terrible GI situation. Like I'm
Oh,
really
yeah.
stressed.
I had that.
The first time I was like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? And it's because I wasn't hydrating or had the amount of
Well, it's not necessarily that. I mean, my stomach will make noises, but it's the
flushing.
Yeah,
Yes.
everything
You
else.
flush. And that also is a lot to do with your microbiome.
yeah.
In your intestinal tract, all of those bacteria and your fungus are eating from the sugar. When you no longer give your body that sugar, those bugs die, and then they have to excrete. So that's what's happening, is you're overturning that the dependency that's happening in your microbiome.
Yeah.
And I've found that acidophilus, since naturally this is a low fiber diet, helps a lot also. Acidophilus, and I'm taking fiber supplements, seem to be helping me.
A lot of leafy greens.
Yes.
Avocados.
Avocados.
Huge.
Spinach.
Yep.
So that is just the weekend, but you're not allowed to have avocados anyway, right? So after the weekend, you start to eat a lot of avocados and all that.
Super high carb, or super high fat.
I wouldn't say a lot of avocado, because avocado can be a little high in carbs.
They do have some carbohydrates, but yeah, you can get a lot of your fats from nuts and oils and butter and heavy cream. We'll have some examples of some things here in a little bit.
Coconut oil is really great.
Beer and alcohol is not good on keto?
No, I mean, beer itself has high carbohydrate content. Your straight liquors, like your vodka, your gin, your whiskeys, they're just going to have alcohol in them, so you're better off consuming those. But beers contain carbs.
4 ounces of dark red wine, some really dry is okay.
If you like to drink, get familiar with vodka soda.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, just a little bit of lemon juice or lime. I'm a fan of that.
All right, so we got about 10 minutes to get through the rest of this, guys. So next up, how do I know when I'm in ketosis, right? So how do I know when my body is truly transitioned over? There are 3 ways to do this test. The quickest and easiest way and most readily available is the first urine test option.
The cheapest method.
So you can go to any CVS, any store like that, and buy these sticks that are on the right-hand side. When you go to the bathroom, you just pass it through your urine stream, and if it changes colors, you're producing ketones.
So if you do this, you want to be in like the second color to the third color. If you're way over here in the purple, I would be careful. I would start to call your physician because there's a state known as ketoacidosis, which is a huge problem, and that's when you affect your blood pH levels. Basically, your blood becomes too acidic, and that can be really bad. So you want to be down here. You want it to be kind of in this middle range.
So if you see any color at all there,
That's a good sign.
That's a good sign. That means your liver is creating ketones and your body's starting to use, those ketones.
If you're in it for a long period of time, you go pee on the stick and nothing happens, that's normal. And that's because we talked about 3 ketone bodies. Acetoacetate is what your body will make first, and that you will excrete in your urine, and that's what'll pee on the stick. But over time, acetoacetate makes beta-hydroxybutyrate, the one I'm talking about your brain uses. When you become more efficient with that, this does not pick up that ketone body.
No.
And so it's not going to show anything on you.
I'm always showing trace and small.
Yep, me too.
So at that point, then, which would you switch to, the testing?
I like the blood.
Yeah,
It's the most accurate.
Yeah.
For those of us who pass out if they prick themselves for a blood test, what would you
Urine then
Yeah.
for the beginning, and then,
There is a breath test option, but, it's not always very reliable. Blood test is going to be your most accurate, but it's also the meter itself is kind of expensive, and the strips that you test are kind of expensive.
The breath is also testing acetone, and that's only isn't a combustible or breakdown of those other 2. So if you're not making it, you're not going to breathe it out.
If you don't like pricking your finger, you need to start now. Because that diabetes, you will be pricking.
I'm not diabetic yet, but I don't want to be diabetic.
How frequently do you do the blood testing?
We do it every other week to once a month.
Do you prick your?
I mean, I haven't been checking mine for a while now because I know that I'm in and I know that my diet's been good and I haven't cheated at all. So
That's the question. So you start Thursday. When do you first test?
Oh, you test through the weekend with the urine.
Yeah,
just to make sure
if
that
you're
Testing around Saturday, Sunday, you'll get,
if you fast,
start to turn darker.
In fact, you did it on the 36 hours in, and he was like way over here. And then I was looking at the ketoacidosis levels, so getting
when I was
nervous.
fasting.
But he's fine. I mean, your ketoacidosis.
Then you snapped out of the fast because you're already way over there?
No, I continued through. When the first time I did my fast, it was more of a willpower test for me, see if I could go 72 hours without eating anything. I finished it out, but I'm very fortunate. I don't know why, but I transition into ketosis very easily, and I maintain it very, very well. I don't know why.
So that's the question actually, to really kind of just understand this. You start and you hit it, and after that if you're already there, then you don't need to finish the 4 days, right?
You still want to keep checking just because you don't know if what you're eating will actually kick you in and out. So, as you're eating combinations of foods, if you're worried if you had too many carbs or whatever, you still want to check this periodically to make sure you're still maintaining it. Until you have a really strong grasp of what you're eating isn't going to change.
And especially if you wake up and you don't feel good,
So you maintain your weekend, and after that, you still keep eating the regular high fat and you keep testing so that you're still somewhere in the middle here.
And I check that about once a week.
And you will always, as long as you want to be in ketosis, you will continue that high fat
And typically, when does one actually really, not have to worry about, you can get back to normal diet, or is this a way of living after?
This is a way of living.
Yeah.
The moment you start eating those carbohydrates, you're out and you start all over.
Yep. There are no cheat meals.
So is there any benefit to actually really being there for like a month and a half and then switching back to living life again?
There's really not a benefit to being in for less than 6 months. You really want to stay in because you're not going to start actually efficiently using those fat stores as an energy source until it's taken that long. So it can be a quick weight loss method, but for the actual metabolic reasons for why you do it, you can do it for a long, long time. I like to drink, or I like to eat. There are certain things you can't get or you can't make on a keto diet, and they're just what you said.
But there are a lot of.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we tested our ketosis, and we're in. So what does an example day look like? So I'm going to go through 3 meals here of what you might combine together, what a recipe you might make, and what a keto day would look like. So we're going to start off by cooking some eggs and some olive oil and making some bacon. Those eggs, and we're going to toss with spinach and mushrooms. Okay, so We're getting lots of fat from the olive oil. We're, eggs, the bacon grease, all of that together. And down here at the bottom, you can see the source is, they have a whole article on this on bodybuilding.com. But that's what a breakfast might look like for you. So not too bizarre, right? But it's not a donut. It's not pancakes. It's not yogurt.
Cereal, it's
Right.
not a donut. It's not.
I've noticed
No. Cameron put us on hold.
a couple times I've seen bacon or butter mentioned and stuff. When you say butter, does that mean you mean proper butter?
Real butter.
Salted, unsalted, no margarine?
And no margarine. That's real butter.
I'll use butter or bacon grease too, because
Yeah, we
we
save
make
all-
bacon every
A container full of bacon grease. Coconut oil is totally fine. Grapeseed oil, a little bit more expensive. Avocado oil is fine. Macadamia oil is fine.
So then for lunch, we can have a taco salad. It has some ground beef, taco seasoning, lettuce, tomatoes in moderation, cheese, avocado, and sour cream. Okay, so we got fat, lots of fat from sour cream, from avocados, from cheese, and our ground beef we're using is 80-20, so it's high fat content ground beef.
Yeah, when you cook that, go ahead and just add more fat to the beef as you cook it and don't drain it. Yeah.
For people who can't have dairy, how do you substitute out things like cheese and cream?
That's a great question. Almond milk, nut milk, will be really your benefit. So, and more of the oils, so add that in. If you're looking for cheese, there's other, there's soy cheeses and stuff that you can.
Sure. They're very expensive.
Yeah, this is not cheap for sure. I would just go without and just keep going with the oils.
Cheaper than going out to eat all the time.
Yeah.
As far as like just, go-to drink then, would a gallon of whole milk in the fridge be important?
No.
Whole milk.
No.
Now, so milk is high in carbohydrates and high in sugars.
heavy cream.
So,
Heavy cream, yes.
nut milk.
Almond milk, good.
Almond milk.
Yep. We buy unsweetened almond milk.
And
Yeah, for real.
Almond, coconut, like unsweetened, fine?
Totally fine as long as it's unsweetened. Just check the carbs on the back. But coconut or almond.
so
In the interest of time, a good question. What if you like to have only 2 meals a day?
You can just.
You can do one meal
as
a
long as
day.
the ratio is the same, you're good.
Skip something, you're fine with that.
There's lots of people that do one meal a day on this diet.
Because you're satiated enough, so you don't need any more.
So again, pork chops, mushroom sauce. So we're looking at, olive oils, pork chops, mushrooms, garlic, spices, whipping cream, asparagus, and butter. So, again, looks relatively normal, but it's very high fat. You're getting in some good greens in there from the asparagus, and then, lots of, not a lot of protein, but some good protein in pork chops. Okay, so these next slides are actual copies of my MyFitnessPal copy, like what the logging that I've done in the past. So I'm not going to go through this in extreme detail, but you're going to have access to these slides. And I've got my macro breakdown, but I also indicated my physical activity during that period of time, okay? So if you're gonna see some big numbers down at the bottom, understand that that's related probably to my activity levels, and that's why I'm able to consume the amount that I am, okay? So I've got 4 different days in here, all with the breakdowns, and so that way you can also see what I've been consuming. You can ask me questions about any of these items, and I'd be happy to talk to you about them.
Plus, Nathan's goal isn't weight loss. So my caloric goal is like 1,800 calories.
Yeah, that's an important thing that we can talk about too, is what are your goals? Mine is weight gain from lean muscle mass, basically.
Well, and if you have heart health, like we're really interested in heart health and preventing diabetes ultimately.
So we're gonna go through a few of these FAQs pretty quickly. Can I have cheat meals? No, you cannot. If you eat a donut, you're out of ketosis and you start all over again, which means you go through the keto flu again, okay? So if I go out and binge drink and I have, 10 beers, I'm gonna kick myself out of ketosis. If I, for breakfast, go have, a bunch of waffles, I'm gonna do the same thing. So be careful about that. There are no cheat meals. Watch what you eat so you don't kick yourself out. Is paleo the same as keto? No, it is not. Paleo has higher carbs. It's actually much more lower fat, high protein, high vegetables. So not really the same. We already talked about cholesterol, sugar-free candy, Be exceedingly careful if you have any of it, because I don't know if anybody's, like Nina had mentioned, read the Haribo or whatever, gummy bears, like.
It's, with maltol, and maltol causes GI stress. So if you're ever looking at a label and you're like, is there some hidden ingredient in there? Like, maybe just ask somebody or put it back if you're not sure.
Yeah.
We didn't go through like how to identify those bad sugar ingredients, but there are ways to know.
I tend to avoid artificial sweeteners myself because I think they
Also,
don't help with cravings, so.
if the thing's less than 1 gram of sugar, they can mark it as sugar-free. So Tic Tacs say sugar-free,
Not true.
they're literally just sugar.
Yeah.
But they can mark it as sugar-free because each Tic Tac is less than 1 gram. So it's actually not sugar-free at all.
That is very.
So there's deception and stuff like
I
that.
think they do show carbs though on.
Yeah, but they do say sugar-free.
Truvia is okay for a marginal amount, so is erythritol, which is Truvia. But xylitol is too, but if you have pets, do not buy xylitol because it's toxic to them. But those are some that you can use a teaspoon of for sweetening.
All right, so what about those ketone supplements? Can they get me in ketosis? So you might talk to somebody who's like, oh yeah, I'm in keto. I drink this keto drink every day and I'm in keto. Totally not true. What's happening is they're drinking ketones and then they're checking their urine and they're showing ketones, but they're just literally excreting them. That's all that's happening.
It's just another vitamin.
Yeah.
And so it's false positive.
Yeah. So some ketones can help you transition into to provide you with ketones to drink, but if you meet somebody who doesn't have that high fat diet, they're not in ketosis. What about breads, pasta, and pizza? I can't live without them. Okay, very valid question here. There are keto versions of breads, of pastas, or zero carb pastas, and you can create like a keto dough for your pizzas.
These aren't necessarily things you can just go buy though.
Correct. A lot of them you gotta make.
Their doughs you make yourself. It's with a lot of eggs and mozzarella cheese and a little bit of almond flour or coconut flour.
So, but those are possible. There's a lot of recipes out there.
Shirataki noodles are just a plant noodle. It's basically like celery made into a noodle. You can use that for a pasta. You can buy that in the stores.
And it's pretty good. I was
skeptical. He was super weird about it.
Figured out like how to make them yet.
We can chat.
Yeah. So
we did the alcohol conversation.
Yeah, we already talked about alcohol, and we already kind of talked about meat. So if I am a meat eater and I sit down and I eat, 4 chicken breasts, boneless, skinless chicken breasts, and nothing else, I'll kick myself out of keto. Because again, your body will turn that into glucose, and you'll go through that process. Okay, so
I did.
Fish is good.
Great.
Okay, so like
Salmon.
not sushi rolls because that's got rice, but sashimi or just.
Right. But you got to be careful. Like it's still protein, right? And you need to balance it with fat. So anytime,
fatty acids.
yeah, if you were just to consume a bunch of straight tuna, it probably would be too much protein, even though there's a decent fat content in there. So you just got to watch the
Talking about your favorite drink, I really like a dirty martini, vodka martini. So I have them actually ask for a shot of olive juice because olives are high in fat. So you can always add that in, and that gives you the really good salt. So if you're curious.
All right, so we've got a bunch of resources here for you. First and foremost, online resources. We've got a 1-week getting started plan.
It's actually what I use.
Yep, this is Shane's recommendation. There's some great reading here on keto in a nutshell, kind of recaps what we talked about here. There's a great community online of people who post about keto. They post recipes, they post all kinds of stuff. There is a specific community just for keto recipes where you can go steal a ton of ideas. An awesome podcast link to just listen about, ketosis and all of the benefits.
Well, I listened to one from Dom.
Yeah, Don D'Agostino is a leader in the field. He's down in Florida, and so he's got a PhD as well, and he really has done most of what we consider the forefront research.
And this is his website, ketonutrition.org, so that's Dom D'Agostino's website.
Where's this presentation available where I can?
I put it in onboard, and it's an onboard resource for anybody.
Can you guys do me one favor? This is the last slide, right?
Nope. So we got this one and 2 more. So there are a couple apps. MyFitnessPal is a really easy free one for tracking all of your stuff. Those screenshots that I showed you a little bit ago, that was from MyFitnessPal. But there is a Keto Diet specific app. You do have to pay for it. So I recommend you do some form of tracking to keep yourself on track. There are a couple of great books The first one is the Ketogenic Bible. This has a ton of the cutting edge research related to ketosis. It has recipes. It has everything you need in there for the Keto Bible, and then a handy recipe book, especially if you like to use the slow cooker at home.
That book is written by the key leaders in the field, PhDs and MDs. So it summarizes the actual research that's been done in the last 100 years. So if you're going to look for a reputable resource, that's the one to read. And it's the most recent.
Yep. And it's easy enough for a non-PhD to read.
Yeah. It has great graphs.
The last one here, Wild Tree, and this is just a slight plug. Nina is a Wild Tree rep, but they do have some awesome keto workshops where you can do these freezer meals. You basically put them together in advance, throw them in your freezer, and then pull them out and throw them in the crock pot or whatever when you're ready to eat.
Yeah, if you want help meal prepping, please email me. I'm doing a workshop on the 19th, and we have keto meals. But also, like, you just don't realize when you're looking at seasonings that there's a lot of added extra sugar additives. You won't get that in this company. And if you have things like you can't have dairy or you have other gluten allergies or something, this is a great resource. But just email me if you have questions about how to meal prep.
Yep. And so again, I'm also a resource. You can always come and ask me questions. I'm here and happy to talk to you about any of it. If you're having challenges or anything along those lines. Yeah, Shane's awesome. He's been doing it and having great success. So yeah.
Good. I feel pretty resourceful now.
Lots of resources.
But I do have a question actually. Let's say somebody here decides, okay, this is good, but it's not for me. What should you do
to help?
Yeah.
Without doing this?
Yeah, you don't have to, go climb Mount Everest.
Excellent question. So I'm also a personal trainer and a fitness instructor, so I have lots of people where I'm like, keto is not necessarily people's thing. We can talk about lowering carbohydrate levels. You don't have to go to 20 grams. You can start looking at under 150. And
that's what I was wondering. Some of those tests, is there anything that you should test and say, try and figure out where you are on this test and get to a better level?
So it's not necessarily keto.
Basically, reduce carbs somehow, but not, go apeshit.
Yep. Journal. So if you went back to the pyramid, the pie chart, you can adjust your protein ratio to your carbohydrate and fat. So what I tell people first is drop your carbohydrate ratio to 20% of your daily
I think I missed that slide.
Yeah, the very beginning. So I start people, and I've had this with, I think I have 3 women clients right now that have lost over 40 pounds apiece and lost multiple sizes in pants. And so what we did first was we made the fat and protein ratio 40-40, and then your carb is 20%. Usually with 15 to 20% carbs in your daily diet, you're looking at around 100 to 150 grams, and that is very doable if you still want to have.
This you're saying on some tracking basis, like use the same app, but get
use the same app and change that. Yep, defer the ratios to 40-40-20.
Yeah, you can enter your ratios on my.
And then it will tell you how many grams of each you need to eat.
And you're looking at the amount you're in, every label,
Yeah, pretty much. Or over time, you kind of get a sense of it. You will start to recognize what's a high carbohydrate meal versus a high fat meal or super high protein, and it just comes with time and knowledge, exposure to reading labels.
Yes.
Like if you.
Yeah, that's good actually. I think that sort of answers my question. The other question is, I wish there is a place, and you guys may know because you obviously have PhDs and such here. It feels like everybody's diet needs to be looked at and say, okay, you need to cut out these. This is where you're doing most damage. Like there's an 80-20 rule in everything in life, I'm sure. Like what I'm doing on a regular basis just because I like this and I like this, if somebody looked at that and told me, okay, you need to just do this first. Like I know when I work from home, I have like 5 cups of tea, which means 5 spoons of sugar.
Yeah.
And when I work from office, I actually have black coffee, so there's no sugar whatsoever throughout the day. 5 teaspoons is a lot.
Yeah.
Based on this presentation.
You try just lowering the sugar you put in every time.
Or even
I did try all of that. Of course, I've tried also, but it's not, I'm not sure because I don't really have like a massive, need to, control. So I'm like, might as well enjoy my tea.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I'm saying, maybe it's just a simple question of us doing this test, like, mapping it out and saying, okay, this is the range, 40, 40, 20, and then saying, okay, if that didn't help or I don't really feel better, then maybe trying this because this looks like the final frontier.
This is definitely the extreme.
Yeah.
What I tell people is the extreme. I think it depends on your goal. So when people come and ask me, what should I do? I said, what do you want? Do you want to lose weight? Are you trying to feel better? the goal is the first thing I want to assess, and then I want to look at your food over time, and we can talk about what's doable. So I'm not going to go to someone and say, hey, I think you really should do the ketogenic diet and use a ton of heavy cream, and you're going to come back and say, oh, but I can't have dairy. Like, that doesn't help you anyway. But what helps me is you saying, these are my favorite meals. I'll probably ask you, what are your 5 favorite meals? What are things you make most at home? So what your favorite things are to eat, and then going through and saying, let's see how we can adjust this so that you can do it and you don't hate your life because you're doing something that's too far out of your norm.
I will say, like, I'm not keto, but I've gone through, like, extreme diet changes due to just finding out that I wasn't allowed to eat certain foods that I thought I could. And you learn to find other things that you like, that you used to love this so much and it was your favorite thing, but if your tastes change and adjust, and
Especially
habits change and adjust,
There's no
and
doubt.
your quality of life does not get lost.
Especially
Okay.
if you feel sick. Like, I went through a whole bunch of gluten sensitivity, so I was already off of gluten
You
anyway.
start to feel like the difference in how much better you feel. You don't even want those things
that's
anymore
the thing
because you
that
realize
makes
how
it
much, like, I
That's
just want to feel good. I just want
100% how I feel. Like,
When you were first in it, you weren't quite
No,
sure because you
but
weren't
I've been
actually
in it for long enough now to where, like, I don't, like, we go to a party or something, I could throw back several beers. I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Chips
Or I
instead.
could, or we're going to go to a pizza party or something like that, and I could devour pizza. I don't want to do it because I know how good I feel when I'm in keto.
Not
Like,
worth it.
it's not worth it. It's not worth it to knock myself out of it, feel
But
like
you weren't
crap.
feeling bad prior, right?
Well, that's the thing.
Like, I'm not feeling anything bad,
So
actually.
but
I
most
don't know what
people
good
don't.
is. I don't know what feeling good is.
Correct. So
You
you're
right
normal.
now think you feel good,
Yeah,
but
your
you
normal may
haven't.
not be
Yeah, you
the
don't-
potential that you could be at. Because
I would concur.
I'm already killing it, guys.
Ultimate
Yes,
answer.
yeah.
I have 3 friends that work out with me at Sassy. One has been with me, she works out with me 6 days a week. She is not doing this, but she is 40 pounds down and has just gone down from a size 16 to a size 10 pant. And she is like, I feel great because I have more energy, but she just eats different. Now that's her now.
That's what I was saying. So that's probably, I'm assuming that's low carb in
She
some
is
form.
doing what she's calling low carb, but she's sticking to 100 to 150 grams. There's a point of no return. You don't want to go under 100 because everybody's different. So
Like
for me,
I would start to do that weird transition thing.
well, he would be probably kicked out. Like,
Yeah.
and I need to be 75% fat to be in. He needs to be 60% fat to be in, and we know that because we check our levels. I get really irritated by that because he can get away with eating more meat than I can, but my body just likes to do gluconeogenesis, and that's going to kick me out. And so you have to adjust your own body.
Yeah, and I also do things like I power roll 3 days a week at the gym, right? So, and I'm at the gym every day of the week if I can.
When you're working out, you're
that makes a
forcing
big
that
difference on your
adipose
diet. So
Yeah, you
if
need
you're a
that
marathon
protein.
runner, keto is not probably for you.
You're hypoglycemic, you cannot do the
there-
keto diet.
I've been working,
But
I've been.
there are
What if
huge
you had-
benefits. So
I didn't start losing weight.
You
So,
want to talk to your physician first and see if it's.
Did you ask
You
anything?
know?
I'm going to go ahead and stop the
Pregnant?
recording.
Yeah.
So.
I was thinking probably that's an automatic no, so I didn't ask.
Being pregnant in keto, my wife
Oh,
is
that's a
pregnant.
really good question. If you are pregnant, don't start keto. But for example,